My huge biceps are bothering me.
Arnold over there in Denver.
There was a day when they had guns, but they've all
You
gone.
still have guns. They're just
They've gone
barely
by the
screwed on.
wayside, the waistline. That's where they've gone.
Well, it's better than me. I've never had guns. Nobody's ever accused me of being muscular, that's for sure.
All right. Well, this is our introductory podcast here. My name's Perry. I have with me Nate. This is our first time, so we're trying to figure everything out as we go. Bear with us. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I think we're going to have a lot of interesting things to talk about. Nate and I were talking before we started here, kind of about topics we might talk about today, and a couple of things we talked about was just what are our backgrounds, what's our experience, what brings us together. So we thought we'd just do that today during this thing, and then maybe end it with a fun story about how Nate and I met, which is we're still both trying to figure out how that actually happened. So, Nate, why don't you talk about where you came from and where you are now with Foundry Business?
Well, I appreciate that, Perry. Thank you for the introduction. And as far as my background and experience goes, I've been in the foundry industry for right out of a little over 30 years. Started in 1994, actually fresh out of high school. Didn't know nothing from nothing. Kind of like a calf staring at a new gate. Had no clue what I wanted to do, but um, I went to work at a pattern shop. Actually, it was Sooner State Pattern Works in Blackwell, Oklahoma, for Rick Busfield, and worked under his the guidance of his brother Cliff Busfield, which recently passed away this last year, 2024, which is unfortunate because his expertise in the pattern making field is rare. Those people are an amazing wealth of knowledge, and their thought processes are amazing. So it's unfortunate that Cliff passed away, but I learned a tremendous amount about pattern making skills in the grand scheme of things. I worked that way for 3 years. In 1997, I went to work at CFM Corporation in Blackwell, Oklahoma, which my mother-in-law, believe it or not, was the office manager there. Got me an interview with the president, David Keiss. Got hired as soon as I went over there and interviewed with him. They needed somebody in the pattern shop. I went to work there 2 weeks later, turned my resignation in, or my notice into Sooner State Pattern Works. Of course, that was a tough conversation. Kind of the first time I'd ever really quit a job before, which was tough.
Oh man.
Um, and unfortunately they'd poured about 3 years into me. And if anybody, the people that are listening to the podcast and they know pattern makers, for example, you don't find people that will build pattern tooling just on every street corner. You can't just go hire somebody and then do that type of work. So unfortunately, the amount of time and effort that they poured into me, and I'm very grateful and blessed because of the time that they poured into me and the money. Honestly, I mean, there was a lot of mistakes. There was things that happen when you start doing that sort of stuff that doesn't come cheaply. Looking back at it and reflecting on it, those guys, thank you for the experience. Thank you for the opportunity. I figured out that I didn't want to be a full time pattern maker though, and I was very fortunate about that. Um, there was a guy that worked there named Roger Myers that actually would check our work for quality purposes before it left. Holy moly, I'd be eating ibuprofen like Tic Tacs. I was so nervous and had so much anxiety because I was worried about something not being in spec and meeting the customer's requirements. And it was almost like Roger's life mission to make sure that there was a lot of red ink on that PPAP type inspection. And so, with that being said, it was not something I wanted to do. I didn't enjoy that part of it. I always enjoyed woodworking, and that's what actually led me to go to the pattern shop, was to be a bench pattern maker and build patterns, because I wanted to build fine furniture, but there was nobody in our county that could afford anybody to build fine furniture, custom furniture. They just didn't exist. So 1997, I went to work at CFM Corporation, which was an iron foundry, and in that time frame, working in the pattern shop, there was two of us out there. I worked with Kenny Love, and kind of learned a lot from him about rig and repair and that sort of thing. And you can only rig and repair so much stuff, and when you're pretty efficient at it because you already came from a pattern shop of highly skilled individuals and craftsmen. Well, rig and repair is relatively simple. You can only sweep the shop floor so many times before you start wearing the concrete out. So I would venture my way out into the pattern, or out in the foundry, to see, hey, maybe there's something out there that needs to be brought in. We can repair it and get it ready and prepped. But um, once we got to where the place was running really pretty efficiently, I didn't need to spend as much time in the pattern shop, and which was a blessing for the fact that I could actually spend time in the foundry itself and learn the processes. And there was our furnace operator. His name's Jack Wynn. At the time, I was attracted to the melt deck. There's something about putting steel and putting pig iron and cast and material and all that sort of stuff, alloying all that metal, and it just melting in this big crock pot, so to speak, and it melting down to nothing. At the time, that we actually had a cupola shop, which was one of the only cupolas in Oklahoma at the time. Actually, it may have been the only cupola at the time. Um, so once we would start pouring out of the cupola, we intermittent tapped that cupola. It took 2 days to set the floor up, and we would go hard and heavy all day on a Tuesday, and pour back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And in that process, you learn a lot about efficiencies. Those guys are very good at their jobs. Um, Halloween and all those sort of things. So through the process of walking through all the different departments, from pour making to molding, to assembly, melt and pour, shake out, all that sort of stuff, which I wasn't attracted to shake out. It was a dirty, hot job, so I tried not to do very much of that. But you do enough of it to earn the respect of the other guys around you, and pick up a lot of tips, because everybody that do those jobs day in and day out, they figure out the easiest way to get things done, which is pretty remarkable, that good old fashioned American craftsmanship and ingenuity and the work ethic in the foundry industry. You won't find better people, salt of the earth people that love getting up, making something from nothing, recycling material. There's something very gratifying, especially in the foundry industry of iron foundries, when you get to take a pile of junk, literal junk, and you mix it, blend it, melt it, alloy it to make it what it's supposed to be, chemistry wise and mechanical properties, and turn it into something that's useful again. You know what? We were green before green was cool, or before it was even a thing. And we've been this industry in general is the biggest recyclers ever, and have been for millennia. I mean, forever. So it's pretty exciting to be able to do that. In So I worked at CFM for right at 16 years, off and on, towards the end of my career at CFM. My dad and we built up a computer repair shop and internet service back when dial-up internet was a thing. So in the kind of all throughout the late 90s, in the 2000s, early 2000s, we had a dial-up internet service, and then we sold that business. I did that on the side with my dad, after hours. You'd work two or three jobs, and that's just what you did to make a living, and provide for your family, and provide health insurance, and all the struggles that we still deal
Yep,
with today. I
yep.
mean, those costs are still were still in place then. I take pretty good pride in thinking back, right out of high school. I've always had health insurance, and for my family and that sort of thing. So it's just one of those things you get up to go to. I mean, we are blessed in the fact that we get to protect and provide for our families. There's no greater gift to give to somebody
Absolutely.
than to protect and provide for them. Love them where they're at, even when we're knuckleheads. And So it's one of those things. Is that a political statement? Knuckleheads. Oh, forgive me. It's not a political
I'm sure
podcast.
this is gonna come out somewhere during our long tenure of podcasts to come. Nate and I are not the
So
most
funny.
politically correct guys in the world.
No, yeah, we're a little rough around the edges, so you'll have to just give us a little bit of grace.
Yeah.
But with that being said, my dad and I, we built that business up, and then I left the foundry for a little while, about a year, and went and built out a wireless broadband company, which was called Chisholm Trail Networks. Believe it or not, in northern Oklahoma, we covered 26 different towns, rural towns. And then we built this wireless network that was high speed. There was no high speed in these rural areas. And of those 27 towns, we used all grain elevators, believe it or not. We would put all of our equipment on top of grain elevators. We'd make deals with the local electric or the grain co-ops to provide them with high-speed internet because they needed to connect all of their grain elevators together so that they could actually communicate with kind of like an ERP system, but it was specialized for the grain industry. And of course, we did it at no cost to them because they were allowing us to use their structures at no cost. So it was a marriage made in heaven in that
Yeah.
regard. Um, the only trouble with that type of a situation was they put strict guidelines on us that we had to have this wireless network up and running. I think we had 60 days to get 26 locations online, and they were spread out, immensely spread out. And for every day we didn't get it done, I think it was $2,000 fine or
Oof.
basically a penalty on our case. We got it done in 61 days. They were good enough old boys that they didn't charge us the other fine, I guess you might say,
Yeah.
penalty, which was a blessing because they knew what we were working through. We did have to work through some storms and some stuff like that, but all in all, it was a huge undertaking for about four of us to get that whole network built and done, all network, all routing, all that stuff in place, all the way back. All the way back to Enid, Oklahoma. Actually, it was all wireless. There was no T1 lines or anything like that. All this computer IT nerdy stuff, but it was all wirelessly routed and fed back to the main location. So there's lots of hops in between. Just so happens, nerd out a little bit because it was pretty cool at the time. We were actually installing computers, PCs on top of these grain elevators in like steel NEMA boxes. So it was, but there was the software and the hardware wasn't really in place for what we need to do. It's not like it is today. We actually used a lot of equipment that wasn't even actually designed for what we were using it for. We just kind of shoestring budgeted and made software work and routed things with actually some of the routing software and hardware that, or at the time it was mainly only software. We used other devices for the hardware. Was MicroTik, which is based out of Latvia over in Russia. It was Russia at the time, and unbelievable. So you were dealing with some nuances of Russian software developers, and the languages didn't always jive and all this stuff. But fortunately, when it comes to routing, IP is kind of a universal language in and of itself. So it's pretty cool. We built that up. The whole point of us building that up was to actually to sell it. We had our exit strategy that was part of our business plan. Build this network up, get users on it, subscribers, and then offload it, sell it, and then go do the next thing. Just use it as a stepping stone, a learning tool. And I happen to be the only employee. Just so happens I was a third owner in this business with two other partners at the time. One of them was an actual electric cooperative, K Electric Cooperative in Blackwell, Oklahoma. Great partners, unbelievable. Joe Harris, Tim Rodriguez, those guys were a huge blessing for me. I learned a tremendous amount from Joe Harris. He was a rough, tough guy, but he would take when you were on his team, man, he was a good coach. He didn't give you any quarter, and he was a hard charger. But at the same time, man, I learned a lot from that guy. He didn't get along with a lot of people, but man, he really liked me, and I learned a lot from him.
Yeah.
So I can't speak highly enough about Joe Harris for sure. Unfortunately, he's since passed, but he was a great guy. Tim Rodriguez was worked under him as the bean counter guy, the COO or no CFO. Really good guy, just salt of the earth, humble guys. So that learned a lot from all of those guys in that process. I kind of went a roundabout way after we sold that business to a company called NodaNet. We I was just kind of just, well, what am I going to do? And my wife's like, well, you're not just going to sit at home. So I would set myself a goal at the time to make a couple $100 a day, cash, whatever it was. I could dig ditch or um, run phone lines or Cat 5 cables for companies or whatever. So me and one of my buddies, Jeff Hunsaker, we actually went out and we started just doing odd jobs. And because my wife was like, I still expect to get a paycheck. I was like, yes, ma'am, no problem. You got it. You got it. Yep, whatever. And so we did. Well, sometimes we'd be at the lake by 10 a.m. because we'd already be done working. We
Wow.
set our goal with a couple $100 a day, and by the time we both made a couple $100, we'd help each other, and we would get that stuff done. And so after a while, David Kaiser kind of called me, "Hey, I heard you sold your business. When are you coming back to the Foundry? I could really use your help. I got a position for you." And so after about 2 or 3 months of him bugging the crap out of me, I went back to work at CFM in the foundry and continued my tenure there. After 16 years, went to work at took a position as general manager position at D Foundries in Houston, Texas, for Robert Wolf. And from there, we I learned the copper based alloys, a lot of bronze alloys, some really nasty bronze alloys. When I say nasty, I mean they're not real easy to pour. They have a really high propensity for oxidation
Mhm.
defects, lots of shrink, and we also poured aluminum alloys. So I'd always done iron, and we'd done some stainless steels of that nature at CFM with induction melting from Inductotherm, and going from iron to gray iron, you could teach a 10-year-old how to pour gray iron. It's not too difficult. Shrinkage is not really a big deal. Matter of fact, you can make some gray irons where they actually expand and you don't have any shrink at all if you have the chemistry right and you got your carbon and silicon in the right proportions. You can eliminate that. And so learning all the copper based alloys and the aluminum alloys was pretty eye opening to see the things that you have to do to provide a good sound casting. And it was very educational. And I was there for right at 12 years. About 2.5 years ago, my business partner and I, Matt Lyons, we bought a gray and ductile iron foundry in Belle Plaine, Kansas, called Kansas Castings, and we bought that from Ron and Pat Pomeroy, and they had built this business up from a very modest foundry of just a few people, all the way up to a pretty close to 50 employees with two physical foundries over a 30-year period of time. Really successful, built a great team, great foundries. They're modular foundries, just plant one and plant two. And we still operate that today. My business partner, Matt, he's the general manager, and he runs that on the daily in Kansas. And then as of January 1, 2025, my wife Kelly and we purchased the assets of Pumpworks Castings in Lufkin, Texas. So we're running this facility as KN Manufacturing Incorporated. So now we have the two physical foundries in Kansas at Kansas Castings, and we're operating this steel foundry. And it's a unique foundry for the fact that it's a sand based foundry as well as an investment foundry, which is unusual. A lot of times you don't see both of those in the same facility. It's a unique situation, a unique setup. It's one of the things that we set out to do years ago. Over 25 years ago, I set a goal for myself, and why I picked 5 foundries. There's a reason for it, mainly because of alloys, iron, steel, bronze, aluminum, and investment castings. That's where the 5 things came from. But kind of feel like with the partnership that I have with my good buddy Matt in Kansas, we have 2 foundries, which is gray iron and white iron, and then we do ductile iron in plant two. So we have 2 there, and technically this foundry at K&N here in Lufkin is pretty much 2 foundries in one, with the investment castings and with the sand castings that we do for steel, which is Furan no bake molding process and core making. So we got 4 of the 5. So now we just need to incorporate some copper based alloys and aluminum, and we've got some plans for that in the future as well, which is pretty exciting to kind of close out that desire of 5 foundries to kind of covers the gamut of most castings that customers need, and we can utilize and pass on the expertise and the mentorship and coaching that we've learned over the years. So it's an exciting time for us for sure.
Yeah, so if you haven't figured it out already, Nate is the brains of the operation. He is, he's the guy with all the experience. I have asked Nate a lot of questions over the years, about things, and it's been very helpful, so it's been great, but, um, I think that Nate will brings an aspect to this podcast that actually gives it some authenticity. I mean, it gives you, um, this guy knows what he's talking about. On my part, um, I'm an old software guy. This is kind of crazy for me. I spent my entire career working in basically developing software and developing systems for large storage systems, and that's kind of where I came from. I came out of um, a company that made disk drives to working on another company that was putting them together and trying to make big things out of them. And it's just been a crazy thing. And I got into this casting business quite quite by accident. I had I this is going to be a crazy story, but I bought a Mustang, 65 Mustang. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to make some parts for this thing. I know I'm going to have to. And I thought at the time, blacksmithing might be the way to go. And I could forge brackets. I could do things. Yeah, I could.
I don't want to see that. That's funny.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. I was the world's worst blacksmith. Um, anyway, I started doing that, and I started watching and some videos on it, and I thought that's how I could learn, and then I actually started producing videos on it on YouTube, and started a small channel just with me trying to learn how to blacksmith things. That evolved fairly quickly into learning how to cast metal because I saw people pouring metal into molds, typically just ingot molds. And I thought that just looks like something I could do. And I think the opportunities there to do things are pretty crazy. So I quickly threw together some stuff. I got some playground sand and I got some kitty litter and I tried to make my own green sand and failed terribly. I have I gave a friend of mine my very first casting. It was a 60, a little plaque about, I don't know, 4 inches by 6 inches, and, I used birthday candles as wax, and I ended up pouring the metal right over the top of them, and you couldn't tell what it was. We laugh about it today. He still has it. He's had it for 5 or 6 years now. It just looks like a blob. Nothing there. And that was my very first casting, and as I started getting into it, I started watching a lot of videos on YouTube that were showing me things and talking about things, that kinda told me, "Okay, there's more to this than just pouring metal down a hole and hoping something comes out in the right shape." And so I started doing that, and quite honestly, I managed, to get hooked up with, a gentleman down in Australia that was a mentor for a number of years, trying to be a mentor anyway, on call a more proper way to cast, I suppose. The idea of having a real sprue and having a gating system that made sense and not just cutting some big troughs in the sand. And we he kind of guided me through a lot of that stuff. And along the way, he introduced me to this concept, this thing called bifilm, right? And I know that people kind of go either way on the whole bifilm thing, but as part of that, I ended up meeting. I didn't meet him, but I started reading books by John Campbell and started to understand what things were about, and tried to start incorporating that into my castings. And I took the mindset of how can I take what Campbell is presenting in a large industrial foundry with all sorts of resources and capabilities and turn that into something, that I can do in my garage. And, what can a dork in his garage do? And that was sort of the basis for the YouTube channel I had. Channel's still out there. I don't really do anything with it now, but uh, it was really about my process of learning how to cast metal and learning the techniques and trying to refine my techniques with the idea of trying to put information out there that might be useful to somebody as they started to get into this world. Something more than just pouring ingots into an ingot mold and then polishing them up and putting them on a shelf and saying, "Look what I made." Right? I wanted to actually do something with my castings. So that's
Mhm.
kind of how how I got started in this world. It should be obvious from listening to Nate talk. Nate is from our, I call it the Midwest. Or you call it the Midwest down there? Nate's out.
I
Nate's
would
just
call it
outside of
the South.
Houston, Texas. Um, I am just outside of Denver, Colorado. So we're miles apart, and I think it's funny. I mean, and we'll share this. Nate and I have never met, which I find amazing. Today we were just talking about it. It's like, wow, we've known each other for how long, and we've still actually never met face to face. We've had countless emails, we've done FaceTimes, we've done phone calls. Now we're doing this together, uh, and we still never have. I've never shook your hand, Nate.
Well, one of these days I'm going to hug your neck, buddy.
Yeah, one of these days we're going to get together and do it. And we were talking before the podcast. We started to record here, and I was we were trying to recount how we met, and I did a
Totally
little bit of
forgot.
research, but I asked Nate. I said, Nate, what do you remember about how we met?" And he doesn't remember. But go ahead, tell me. Just something, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I stumbled upon Perry's YouTube channel, and I found it to be very humorous. I loved everything about it. I liked listening to Perry talk personally. His wife might not like that. I don't know. But with that being said, I found his personality very warm and humble, but at the same time, it was very honest and genuine, and I could feel that through his presentation of his YouTube channel. And I got a lot of good laughs over his videos for the fact that he was showing. I mean, he didn't candy coat. If you go watch his YouTube channel, he doesn't candy coat his mistakes. He shows you where he makes a boo boo. He doesn't edit a lot of that stuff out. Um, that's real
I would
life,
have had no
and
videos
for
if I
me,
didn't show my mistakes.
that is huge. For somebody to actually be genuine enough and to check their ego and to actually allow themselves to be vulnerable in that case, because most people don't want to be seen as a goof or I made a mistake. People, typically hide their mistakes, right? They don't admit that they fail. Well, here's the reality of life in general, especially in the foundry, is we make mistakes, we fail. The thing that you'll a lot of times people will say failure is not an option. Failure is not an option. Well, I'm here to tell you, I fail every day
Yep.
to some degree, not usually big, usually small things, and we don't duplicate the same failures that we did yesterday today because we would be a moron if we did that. We're not those type of people. We move the ball forward and we try to be better today than we were yesterday. But with that being said, I found that to be very warm and something that I enjoyed doing. The other thing that I Barry, I don't even know if I ever told you this is you have the heart of a teacher. I
Mm.
feel that in your videos, I know that you want to better other people in the whole process of the home hobbyist foundry guy. I find that to be very interesting. I'm a foundry guy. I've got sand in my blood, sand in my veins, and I love it. Foundry business in general, making castings, the best job I've ever had. I can't say it enough.
Mm.
This is the funnest job I've ever done in my life. It doesn't feel like a job. It's very fun. I wake up in the morning. I'm excited to go knock something else out of the park. We come to work to hit home runs. It doesn't feel like work. It's exciting. It's fun. It's it's a challenge, especially with the generations that we face today with work ethic and everything else. It doesn't have anything to do with foundry. It just has to do with generational um, individuals. I believe there's a lot of people out there that don't actually even know about the foundry industry. They don't even know this it exists. That we do the things that we do, and it's been said. The statistic out there is you're never within farther away from a casting. You're 10 feet away from a casting in any given time. That is even on the space station. Castings make the world go round and round. Brake drums on your car, ductile iron castings. The engine blocks a lot of times are aluminum castings or cast iron. There's a casting everywhere. You drive over castings every day. Manhole covers are gray iron castings. East Jordan Ironworks is an example. Those guys make tons and tons and tons of manhole covers. Guess what? They make the most beautiful manhole covers. I'll be walking around and I'll see a manhole cover, and guess what? It shows EJ on it, East Jordan Iron Works. Those guys, that company is based out of Michigan. They have a plant in Oklahoma, in Ardmore, Oklahoma. They make phenomenal castings. I'm just a casting dork. I love checking out castings, fire hydrants. Man, there's a lot of different companies that make fire hydrants. You know how vital fire hydrants are? We take them for granted that they're sticking up in the corners everywhere.
Yeah.
There are companies that make those, um, and there's tons and tons of castings in there. They make thousands of those things every year, year after year after year. There's iron that goes in those castings. There's bronze castings, everything else in there. So I'll digress. But back to what you'd asked originally was, uh, one of the things that struck me as interesting is when Perry actually started talking about Professor Campbell and he put some videos out. I was like, whoa, this guy knows about Professor Campbell. Nobody knows about that. There are people in the foundry industry don't even talk about Professor John Campbell. And this guy in his garage is talking about Professor Campbell. That struck me, and I sent Perry an email. And I was like, man, I've been watching your YouTube channel, and just so happens, I know exactly what you're talking about. And in my quest to be a better founderman when it comes to non-ferrous or copper-based alloys, because they're such a pain in the neck to pour, I was searching and searching and searching because I was asking questions and I wasn't getting answers. It was like, well, no, this is just the way we always do it. But there was no explanation as far as why we did what we did. Why do we have to pour this in a certain manner and control it in a certain way, so that we can actually produce a good sound casting that doesn't have a bunch of defects in it? And it led me to Professor Campbell as well,
Yep.
and biofilm theory and everything else that went along with that. Um, it's amazing to me that that's not shouted from the rooftops whenever you get to you dealing with some of the organizations, that promote, foundry educational products, and they will say that we support John Campbell. Sorry, man, I don't know why they don't have Professor Campbell speaking at every conference and rolling out the red carpet for that guy. He knows what he's talking about. He produces some of the best casting. The information, some of it's really simple. Guess what? Foundry 101 and Foundry Fundamentals, it should always be incorporated, most of, if not all of, Professor John Campbell's information.
Yeah, it just
Period.
when I
You
started
can't
reading about that stuff,
utilize.
it just made sense. I mean, it
Hmm.
just made sense to me about what was going on inside the mold and all. It's funny you talk about these, copper-based alloys and doing things because that's the way we do them. I was told this is great. I was told one time by a guy who runs a sculpture foundry, not too far from where I live here in Colorado, and we were talking about it, and he's like, "Well, you always should put a piece of broken glass in some um, borax in your melt to put, and it melts across there, forms this film, and it keeps things from oxidizing." He said, "But you got to use a brown piece of brown beer bottle as your glass."
Of course.
And
Yeah.
I
Well,
said,
that means you get to drink a
I
beer.
said, "So why do you have to use brown beer bottles?" And he said, "Well, because that's what we do." And I said, "Well, who told you?" He said, "Well, probably some guy who was drinking beer out back one day, and that was what he had, and he threw it in his mix." And but it's funny, you talk about why do we do the things we do, and
Hmm.
some of the goofy things that happen. I had someone ask me the other day to make a brass casting for him. I hate brass. I there's nothing about brass I like. It's filthy. It creates so much crap in your crucible, and I don't like the white smoke that comes off it because I think it's gonna kill me. And, you know, but
Zinc.
anyway,
It's
I'm not
typically zinc.
anyway, it's funny. So I'm gonna tell you the story. So I'm gonna correct Nate a little bit on our first meeting. Yes, he did send me an email. Yes, he did send me an email that said, "Hey, I've been watching your videos." Nate and I were both invited to go up to Canada to join a group of people, and there was going to be, there were people from AFS. There were other people. There were a couple other foundry guys, I think,
Yep.
that were invited.
Yep.
Um, Bob Puhaka up there. What is his Innovative Shape Casting? Is that his name of his company? Innovative
I
Shape.
believe
I
so.
think it's what it's called. Had invited us to come up, and I got an email. I got an email from Bob on February 28th of 2020 that said in the subject line, "Hey, would you like to meet John Campbell?" And I responded like instantly, said, "Oh, let me think about it. Absolutely, yes, I would love to meet John Campbell."
Yeah.
And so he was going to do this thing up at his foundry in Canada, and I was a little bit nervous about it because he talked about doing. First of all, we're going to meet together for for steak and whiskey. Well, I don't drink, so
Yeah,
that
that's
was a little
exactly
bit
what
for me. Was
that's what
like,
the subject line said.
What am I going to do? I'm going to have to go out with these guys, all these hard drinking foundry guys, and they're here to be Perry drinking his iced tea. But and then
Steak and
I think
whiskey was the
cigars were part of
subject.
it
Steak
too.
and whiskey.
And they want to smoke cigars. But anyway, I'm thinking this is crazy. I'm looking at the list of people, and it's all these foundry guys. I mean, your thing, D Foundries, was on the name of your email, and all these foundries, and there's just me, the idiot in his garage from YouTube, right, getting invited to this
Yeah.
thing. Soon after that, actually, it was the same day is when I got the email from you saying, "Hey, I'm Nate, and I've been watching your videos and da 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 da." But we that's how we met, and over this thing from this invite from Bob, and unfortunately, it never happened because in March, a month later, he had to cancel because they shut everything down because of COVID.
Yeah, the border was closed down.
Yeah,
You couldn't
we
get
couldn't
there
get
if you
into
wanted to.
Canada, so
No.
we were still able. I think we were still able to fly domestically, but they couldn't get it. We couldn't get into Canada, so that was the end of it. And I just, it
Yep.
was funny. Was in shock. Why would he invite this dork in his garage to hang out with all you guys who know what you're doing? But he did, and I am grateful. I've had multiple conversations with Bob as a result. Um, Bob put together some great videos that we had on my channel for a while, and I would dearly love to turn him back on. Maybe we can negotiate to have that happen. But um, it was just a wild thing that happened, and now Nate and I have known each other since February of 2020. We've known each other, still never met.
Yep. Pretty wild.
Yeah, you're right. And another thing, you brought it up. And I think maybe you'll figure this out throughout the podcast as well. We're both learners, and we both love to learn, and doing new things, and those challenges that come with that. I think that drives both of us. So I think we'll find during the podcast a lot of questions, a lot of trying to figure out things and understand things from some of the guests we're going to have on. Um, Beauty of having Nate around is he knows a lot of people in the industry, and we can bring them in. And that's our plan, is to start bringing these people in and just talking to them about what they're doing or about trends in the industry, or whatever it might be. We want to kind of pick their brains and get that out there for people. And as Nate said too, I do have a heart of a teacher. I love to learn things, and then I want to tell people about them. So I'm hoping that this podcast is an opportunity for us to teach people, to be able to get information out there that may not be out there, or may have been missed. We can get some good stuff out there. And that kind of, I think, segues a little bit into what we're hoping to accomplish with the podcast. Nate and I were talking about this. We've talked about it quite a bit, but um, you've talked about Foundry 101. You mentioned that a little bit ago. What do you mean by Foundry 101 when we say that?
Well, for the most part, I mean, the fundamentals of Foundry are crucial to making good castings, and that starts with good quality sand. It starts with good charge material. Starts with all of the fundamentals of, hey, if I'm making a no bake casting, I really need to know kind of what resin I'm using, what glue am I gluing these sand grains together with. Is it a two-part system? Is it a three-part system? Is it what's it? How do I know if I'm producing a good mold or not? the things that a lot of people take for granted is basically just simple things in the fundamentals 101. Let's start with molding and core making. Well, if you're using a no-bake mold and phenolic urethane or a two-part furan resin system to glue the sand grains together, well, you need to know that it's done properly, that it's calibrated properly. Your mixer, your continuous mixer is clean. You're getting the right mix, which is basically the smearing on of this resin or glue onto the sand grains. Typically, most of the time, on average, I would say most foundries run a 1% total binder for their no-bake molds and core making. Some run a little bit higher, depends on what alloys they're running, or if they're running furan or phenolic urethane, or what that resin system is. But it's 99% sand, 1% glue. If you're not doing that efficiently and doing it properly, you know what? It's dangerous. First off, you could actually burn somebody because a mold could break out and burn somebody and run down their leg or their foot or whatever. We have to be very, very careful and cognizant of that and make sure that we're using the right PPE, so that we can keep our coworkers, our teammates safe. The other thing is, I mean, if you don't have a good control of your resin system, you're going to create gas defects. You're going to create all kinds of other trouble. And most of us that are in the foundry industry, not all of us, if you're an artist and you're an art foundry, well, you can get by with a little bit of gas. It's just character and that sort of thing. But when you're making industrial castings that are highly engineered, and need to meet mechanical properties and things of that nature, well, guess what? You can't have gas defects. You can't have shrinkage. You want to eliminate any veining defects that you get in the mold and the casting because of thermal expansion of the sand. What kind of sand are we using? We're using silica sand, or we're using zircon sand, or we use specialty sands, biosil, and other type of seals that are derivatives and grains of a zircon based system, sand system, or are we using ceramic sand and that sort of thing. So the fundamentals in Foundry 101, going back to the molding, have you calibrated your mixer? It's a very simple thing to do, but you know what? One of the things that gets neglected in the foundry. Why? We're humans. And in the grand scheme of things, the root cause of all of that typically is accountability and just being lazy. No, it's always the same. So why do I need to calibrate it?
Right.
Well, how do you know if you don't calibrate it every week or every day? You may need to do it every shift, depending on how many tons you put through that mixer.
Well, why would it change?
Well,
right? I mean,
exactly. Well, and that's the argument that you
yeah.
get. But at the same time, yeah. But in the grand scheme of things, it's all about character and integrity. If you have your good character and good integrity, guess what? You're going to do what you say you're going to do, and you're going to do it consistently, whether anybody's watching you or not.
Yeah.
So to be a good employee and to be a good teammate, you need to do the fundamentals. You need to practice the way that you want to play. If you want to be a successful football team or a baseball team or a soccer coach, guess what? You need to make sure that your team and your teammates are practicing the way that we want to compete. And in the foundry industry, guess what? It's no different. If we want to be successful and we want to produce quality castings in a timely manner at the most efficient way that we can do it, so that we can make a profit at the end of the day for the business owner that we're working for, or maybe it's for yourself. I don't know. Maybe it's a mom and pop or a guy in his garage. It's a Perry that wants to make something and supplement his income, or just do stuff for friends, for gifts, for Christmas or birthdays or whatever. Well, you need to do it in a way that actually you take pride in what you're doing.
Yeah.
And as a foundryman, it's one of those things that we need to work in that manner. And unfortunately, some people, it's just monkey see, monkey do. And if the previous monkey didn't do it the right way, or they didn't know the right way because the previous monkey to them didn't show them, they didn't know, it's not really their fault. But at the same time, you have to be led in a manner that is productive, and it makes you a better foundryman.
Yeah.
That's the goal, is to be able to provide the information, technical information that people, the guys in the trenches. I was one of those guys that needs to have that knowledge and that information so that you can be a good foundryman. When we understand what we do and why we do what we do, the processes aren't that difficult. The part of the problem is when people accept the fact that they throw it up there and say, "Oh, well, it's just voodoo. It's voodoo and pixie dust. We're not really sure why that happens." Well, there's got to be an
It's got to be
explanation.
an
This is math
explanation.
and science, for Pete's sake.
Yeah.
There's an explanation for everything. Now, we may not have the answer right now what that is, but we can certainly find it, and there's somebody out there that knows what it is. Typically, and I'm a huge advocate for Professor Campbell. I can't even speak, and his top 10 rules for making good castings. If you follow those top 10 rules, they're very simple. They're kind of like the 10 Commandments. A lot of people don't want to follow them, but here we go. If you want to be successful, you follow what he says to do, and I guarantee you, I am hands down. I it works 100% of the time. It works if you do everything you say it do you want to do, or that you need to do. The thing is, and a lot of times, as an example, one of the things Foundry 101 that Foundry should be doing, whether they're copper based alloys, aluminum, steel, stainless steels, and iron alloys, any Newtonium fluid that you melt and pour, you need to simulate that, and you need to get solidification and flow analysis on that. Flow is not necessarily as important as the solidification, because shrink typically is our biggest enemy in the foundry, period. There, most defects have to do with shrink.
Mm.
Yeah, you'll get some core gassing, you'll get some mold gassing, things of that nature. But shrink is manifest even with a bad pouring system. You engineer a bad fill system, you're gonna see shrink, and you're gonna see some defects in there that they're gonna manifest themselves as shrink. And if you just get you a cheap handheld Bluetooth microscope that you can use, you can buy them for less than $50 on Amazon, and you go and look at those defects that you're seeing, I guarantee you most of the time it's going to be shrink.
Mhm.
Typically, it is. That's just the case. And the fundamentals of Foundry is very very simple, and we're going to break down a lot of that stuff as we go through these episodes.
Yeah, great. I think there's so much fascinating information in things like that about, how to use a feeder or a riser, or whatever you want to call it, gating systems and things. And you're right, they're simple, in concept, they're simple. I mean, there may be some high tech figuring out exactly the right size and things for these things, but the concept is simple, and it can make a huge difference in the way the castings come out. So I'm also hoping that we can get into some of the stuff from these smaller foundries, and we've talked about this as well. Running a business. How do you um, get makes money off these things? If you want to run a foundry, you want to start making these castings. How can you make money on it? What are going to be good business practices for doing things? Even some of the things you were just talking about, the resin and such. If you don't do your resin right, you're wasting money because you're making bad parts and you're wasting resin and whatever, and your cost, it's all that costs money. So hopefully we can touch on that stuff as well. And I would love to bring in. There's a couple of people on YouTube that I would love to bring in. There's a couple that I will not bring
Hmm.
in. Absolutely will not bring in. But there are some people out there I think would be great to hear from, because quite frankly, the backyard metal casters, there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of people interested in doing this stuff. Um, they could do it a better way. They really could. So
Sure, absolutely.
absolutely could do it a better way. So it's funny you mentioned the ten rules, uh, and maybe I'll
You have a video about that,
I
right?
do have a video on that. I did a
Yeah.
video on the 10 rules, for casting and they're John Campbell's rules, and that's how I met Bob Pohaka.
Uh,
Because Bob wrote to me in the comments, and it was some cryptic thing like, "Oh, looky here," some guy talking, and I said, "Oh, so do you know about the rules?" And he said to me in another line in the comments, he says, "Yeah, look at page 2 of the book." I didn't know who Bob Hawka was. I had no clue. So I opened my book up and page 2. This book is dedicated to Bob Puhaka. So Campbell Campbell's book is, you know, 11,000 page book is dedicated to Bob. I had no clue, but he was commenting
that's
on my
funny.
videos and introducing himself that way.
That's awesome.
It was
Yeah.
pretty awesome. Anyway, he had a good sense of humor about it. It was pretty fun.
Well, cool. No, that's always good.
Yeah. So Nate, do you have anything else you want to talk about? I think we can kind of wrap it up. We've talked about who we are. We've talked a little bit about where we want to see this podcast go, and I don't know. You got anything else you wanna say?
Well, what I would like to finish up with is, I mean, if somebody's got any topics that they're interested in or they'd like to hear about, let us know. We kind of have a list already of, and some guests that we're going to bring on. Um, a lot of those are going to be centered around the technical type things that foundries are interested in a lot of times. And I think a lot of the hobbyist foundry people at their homes and that sort of thing that are doing lost wax or doing um, 3D printed type mold packages and things of that nature, they'll be able to see some things. We're going to share some videos of 3D printed sand molds and cores that we process and that sort of thing, and here at KN Manufacturing here in Lufkin, and some pours and some things like that are going to be interesting to see. We're going to try to. I would like to see us try to at least play a video of a pour per episode, and kind of let people see kind of what we do safety wise, and the nature of that sort of thing. Maybe a heat treat process and quenching some stuff. And everybody likes to see molten metal and red hot
Right.
stuff. I love it. That's why I was always attracted to the melt deck and the big induction crock pot that I always thought it was. You know, melting something down into liquid form is really really cool. So I'm hoping that we can share some of that as well with other people and grow it in that manner. But if somebody has a question or they've got a topic that they don't know about or they want to know more of, let us know. Send us an email. You can reach us at the foundrytalk.com website, and you can always email Perry at foundrytalk.com, or you can reach me at Nate Nate at foundrytalk.com. Let us know. We're more than happy to serve and teach, coach and mentor other foundry people that want to learn along the way. Try to pass on some knowledge and some information, some nuggets, and along the way, I'm sure some of these people that we bring on as guests, we're going to learn something along the way as well. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. Anybody that wants to listen to us, I'm super humbled by that. And I'm humbled that Perry is joining me in this little adventure that we're doing as Foundry Talk. So
Well, I think, I'm excited about it as well. I think we're gonna hear some great information. I think that a lot of the guys that come from my background will be fascinated to see things happen on a large scale and see things happening in an industrial foundry. Um, it's, I watch it and I'm just amazed. I watch some of the things, and some of the pours I've seen have been just incredible on both sides of incredible. We've
right,
shared some
exactly.
videos of metal splashing all over the place, and, we've shared some videos that were nice, calm, beautiful pours, so
And part of what we like to do is, I mean, the goal is we're going to try to do a video a podcast every 2 weeks if we can get it to where we can get enough content and enough demand. We can do one release one a week,
yep.
and see where this goes. But some of that is it requires a little bit of participation on the listeners' behalf. Let us know. Give us some feedback. If there's something you don't like, and or I scratch my nose, or I scratch my head too much and that sort of thing, hey, we're okay. We got thick skin. I'm a foundry guy. You can't hurt my feelings. So let us have it.
I'm sensitive, man. You hurt my feelings just by looking at me, so
Well, I don't know what to do about that. You're gonna
after
toughen up,
after 5 or
unfortunately.
6 years of a YouTube channel, I think my sensitivity level has gone way down. Anyway,
Yeah, I suspect you probably have rhino skin to the
yeah,
back.
exactly, exactly. And hopefully too, we will I will well, you found us on whatever platform you're looking at listening to, but, we are on, all of the major platforms, so look for us there. You guys have a great day.